One of the things that makes the Psalms so universally loved among God's people is the fact they represent every possible emotion and experience, so that we are able to identify with them and apply the lessons to our own life and situation. I have to confess that at first I found that hard to do, at least for the first part of Psalm 126, the seventh Psalm of Ascent. But the more I thought about it, I could see some aspects that I could relate to, but more of that in a few moments. All the translations I've looked at struggle to consistently translate distinctively Hebrew idioms that are used in the first and fourth verses, which open the two clear sections of this psalm. What is certain, surely, is that the psalmist is recalling the heady excitement and even delirious joy that he and his fellow countrymen experienced when the nation of Israel were delivered from captivity in Babylon after 70 years of exile and restored to their homeland in Judah. In the Hebrew, verse 1 refers to release from captivity, but not specifically in verse 4, though the thought is undoubtedly there. In the English translations, they tend to either mention the word or thought of captivity in both verses 1 and 4, or neither, which is strange. I guess it's all part of the challenge of trying to make an ancient language live in a faithful but readable way today. However, there are definitely linked thoughts in verse 1 and 4, not to mention repeated linked phrases in verses 2 and 5, which go right to the heart of what this short psalm is all about. Shouts of joy. So in the first three verses, the Lord has done great things. The word captivity in the Hebrew, slightly hidden by the ESV's restored the fortunes, confirms that it's right to jump to the conclusion that this is about the end of the Babylonian exile. Like me, you've probably watched films of captives returning home after being held hostage for several years or wrongly imprisoned. And we can only imagine the sense of elation and immense joy coursing through their bodies. Mouths filled with laughter and shouts of joy indeed. And who could blame them? They were, says the psalmist, like those who dream, having to pinch themselves, as we say, to make sure that this is really happening. The psalmist also points out the impact of this event on the surrounding nations. The nations of the world looked on in amazement and had to acknowledge, for there could be no other explanation, that this was the work of God. After all, never before in human history had a conquering power allowed their captives to return to their homeland as Babylon did with Israel. And as if that was not amazing enough, Cyrus and the Persians actually paid them to go home and funded the reconstruction of the land. It's what my American friends would call a God thing. But that joy and thrill doesn't last forever. And soon the routine of normality, of daily living kicks in. And that's what the second half of the psalm is all about. Lord, do great things again. You'll see that it begins with a prayer that God would do something of similar scale again. And the picture here is a clear one. The terrain of Israel was full of wadis or riverbeds, which are usually dry for perhaps 11 out of 12 months of the year. And then the rainy season finally arrives, and after a sudden heavy downpour, torrents of water begin to flow. What a great picture of what God can do for his people and for his work. The change in the circumstances of the exiles in Babylon was on that dramatic scale, but that was then, that was in the past. And here we are now, cries the psalmist. And we need a fresh touch of your refreshing and reinvigorating life poured out on us. But please note the confident tone of verses 4 and 5. This man is not praying as it were, hoping against hope, as it were. He's confident. He moves actually from prayer to prediction. He pictures the local farmer day by day, week by week, month by month, sowing his seed in the most discouraging of situations, weary and downcast, but all the time knowing that he, quote, shall reap. He, quote, shall come home with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him. Friends, I don't believe that we're abusing this psalm, which has such a strong historical setting, when we see in it a picture of the Christian life and work. And here's where I can connect with this psalm, and in two ways. First, I can connect as a believer who, at my conversion, was set free from a lifetime of slavery and bondage to sin and the desires of the flesh. There seemed no hope for me until my eyes were opened to see that Jesus had done everything necessary to set me free. And he did. Maybe you can recall those heady post-conversion days when your heart was continually singing and rejoicing. But then, secondly, normality kicks in, and we experience times of dryness and fruitlessness. What this psalm teaches us and encourages us in is that even when our living and service for the Lord seems dry and unproductive, keep on doing two things. Keep doing all the right things, working hard for the Master, living a Christian life in a hostile world, sowing the seed of the gospel by our words to others, while at the same time praying for the drenching, reviving deluge of the Holy Spirit of God to come and totally transform the situation. Isn't that what revival actually is? We labor on month by month, year by year, decade by decade, seeing precious little fruit and growth. And then God intervenes and does in 5 minutes what we can't do despite all our faithfulness in 5 years. Friends, can I encourage you to take some moments to reflect on your own conversion, or go back and read accounts of revival, and then see if your heart doesn't instinctively cry out for the sons of Korah in Psalm 85, a psalm with many close connections with 126. Will you not revive us again, that your people may rejoice in you?